We're like that. We're like engineers. We're cobbling together solutions all the time. And as long as those solutions work, we assume that we're right. Well, that's the domain of order. The domain of chaos emerges when you lay out a plan and into action, and something other than what you wanted emerges. And sometimes that can be a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. And your brain, our psychophysiological our psychophysiology is actually adapted to those two domains. When something unexpected happens, all sorts of emotions and motivations break loose, fight and flight among them, anger among them. It gets disinhibited because when you don't know what's happening, you have to prepare for everything. So you get anxious, and then you hyper prepare, which is extremely stressful. And so the domain of chaos is extremely stressful. In small doses, it's exhilarating. Mm-hmm. And that's because, well, when you're where you don't know what's happening, you have the opportunity to learn and to expand your map. And so there's always an interplay between the domain of chaos and the domain of order, but they can each pathologize. And the pathologies of uncertainty are more associated with anxiety and nihilism and depression, and whereas the pathologies of order are more totalitarian. And then I would say as well, the liberal types, the more left-leaning types, are quite sensitive to pathologies of order. They don't like them. That's the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. The patriarchy is the pathology of order, and it's symbolically masculine, something I've been, taken to task for claiming. But the patriarchy itself, the idea of the patriarchy itself, is a symbol. The patriarchy is a symbol. That's why it has such power. And it's a symbol that refers to the domain of order. Now, the domain of order is protective as well as oppressive, but when it degenerates, it becomes oppressive. And I would say it degenerates when it's based on power rather than competence, but it can be based on competence. The Marxist critics and the politically correct types, they insist that every element of the patriarchy is only a consequence of the imposition of order, mm-hmm. forceful imposition of order. It's all power. Well, no, it's not. When it degenerates, that's true. And you can tell that because the thing is, the domain of order will be upheld by those who inhabit it if it's functional. Mm-hmm. If you have to use force, that's already an indication that it's become pathological because people aren't playing voluntarily.
So would you say we're in a degenerative cycle right now, that the cycle seems more degenerative than say a building cycle, or you think that that's just the play that's always going on and you have to figure out your role in it?
Well, I think the play is always going on. And I don't think, the antidote to chaos isn't order, and the antidote to order isn't chaos. The antidote to both is the balancing right. of them, the active balancing of them. And that's where you find
You used
meaning.
To do this a lot. You would say the balance, the struggle between liberal and conservative. So people see me doing this all the time. I always credit, he was talking about this. But so you think that's it?
Well, it's really important. It's really important to understand that the antidote to chaos in the final analysis can't just be order, right. because order itself can degenerate. And so I believe that the antidote is active engagement with the world, honest active engagement with the world, truth. And I think it's also truth motivated by love, which is a motif that runs through this second book in particular. And love is the desire for all things to flourish. In Christ says that you should love your enemies, and what does that mean? And it's really worth thinking about. You shouldn't wish your enemies harm what I mean by that is that it would be better for everyone if they would conduct themselves so that they would flourish. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't defend yourself. It doesn't mean that soldiers aren't necessary or the police. It doesn't mean any of that. It's not a weak need statement. It mm-hmm. means that if you have yourself pointed in the right direction, you don't wish an excess of harm on the world. You want it to flourish. That's love. So you orient yourself that way. And I do believe that requires a certain courage, because the world is so flawed and so painful. There's so much suffering in it. It's very difficult to fall in love with it. You keep getting bounced off. You think this is so terrible that maybe it shouldn't even be. But that takes you down a very bad road. So it's love first, and then truth serves that. And I do think that's the motif that runs through the Old and New Testaments, the combination of those two things. Love is the desire that being flourish. And I do believe that truth serves that.
Well, that's a...
So...
No, please finish your thought.
Well, I also think that people find meaning in that. And everyone can answer this for themselves. It's like you have to watch and you have to see where it is that you find the meaning that sustains your life. And I would say it's certainly not been my experience that people find that in deceit or hatred. I mean, they may be tempted by that. They may have their reasons for it, but everyone is ashamed of that and wishes it could be otherwise, even if they don't know what to do about that. As you pointed out, I'm going to hold up these books. So this is the new book, Beyond Order, and it does concentrate on pathologies of structure, and the previous book, which is 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And the underlying presupposition there is that in our phenomenological landscape, so that's the world as we experience it, complete with emotions and motivations and dreams, and so the full range of human experience, including the subjective and the objective, let's say, can broadly be broken into two domains. And one is the domain of things that are beyond our grasp and reach, and that's the unknown. The unknown emerges. When the unknown emerges, you tend to experience anxiety. And then there's the known, and I define the known very specifically and very carefully. The known is the place you are when what you're doing produces the results you want. And I say want because that brings motivation and emotion into the game. So you're motivated to pursue something, you pursue it, and what you want happens. Not only do you get what you want, but you get validation for the structure that governs your perceptions and your actions. Now, if you imagine that you're lonely and you approach a young woman in a social situation, attempting to make some contact with her, you want to alleviate your loneliness, and so you hope you make a good impression, and you tell a joke, let's say, in a relatively awkward manner, and you get rebuffed, then you feel you're no longer where you control. You're no longer where you exercise control. And that brings up all sorts of specters immediately. It's like, well, why were you rebuffed?